Hi, and welcome back to another terrain building video. In this video I'm going to talk you through how I made these pieces of scatter terrain. So this is going to be quite a quick and easy build, and if you got some barrels or crates laying around you want to use up, you could easily replicate this in any form you like, so I hope you can take some inspiration from it. For quite a while I had these barrels and crates from GW laying around. These came with these container set things. And I never really got much use out of them because I just sprinkled them around the battlefield when I played games, and it doesn't make for nice terrain in individual pieces. So I decided to make something out of them that could at least count as cover or even as objective markers. In my opinion, the hardest challenge with small scatter terrain pieces like this is going to choose the base. This not only has to fit the base of your miniatures or your gaming mat, but it also has to be really functional. You don't want it to curl up on the edges, you don't want big exposed thick edges, you don't want it to be too thick and stand out too much from the terrain underneath. And for me, I'm going to play on gaming mats mostly, so I don't really want to have big hills on top of these gaming mats, so I had to choose a base that is really flat and doesn't soak too much paint that it curls up or that it deforms too much, so I don't have these wobbly edges. And for all of these reasons I chose a foam board, which is these like cardboard sheets with foam between them. I don't know how to call it in different regions. We also call it architecture paper or architecture cardboard, and it's mostly used in modeling and architectural modeling, so it's really nice, really sturdy. Because it has the foam in between, it's easy to manipulate with a knife, but it's also really flat underneath because it has these cardboard sheets that are quite sturdy and don't really soak a lot of water. So this combines the best of all the materials. It's sturdier than cardboard in that it doesn't soak any water, it's flatter than foam, and it's easier to work with than plastic card. To start out, as you can see me do here, I placed the terrain pieces in a combination I liked on the foam board and traced around it. I then also took a picture of it so I can remember the combination of barrels and crates later on if I have to glue them on the foam board. And after that was done, I just cut them out with a box knife and started beveling the edges. On the one hand, these blades are very flexible, so you can squeeze them against your cutting mat and get really nice beveled edges like I'm doing here. On the other hand, I would really recommend wearing something like safety glasses, because there's always a high risk that your blade's gonna snap off and you will never know where it's going to fly off. It's a matter of taste how steep you want the angle of the bevel. If you have it really flat, there's always a risk that your edge is going to be too thin and it's going to crease over time and it's going to have some easy wear on it with playing a few games on it. If you have it too steep and you have it too thick, you're going to have a big sandy hill for no reason on your battlefield, and your miniatures are going to fall off them, they are going to stand on them with weird angles, and it's not going to be as nice to play on it. So I tried to have something quite flat, but not too flat, so I don't have exposed cardboard on the bottom and always have a thin layer of foam over everything. Because of the foam, it's easy to further manipulate your piece, so I went ahead and pressed with my thumb around the edges just to have a more organic edge around everything and make it seamless where cardboard, foam and cardboard hits each other. And then I gave the whole thing a coat of black craft store paint just to have a primer on it if I put the sand on later, that I don't have white spots shining through. After that I gave everything a coat of white glue, something like wood glue or PVA, I think it's all the same, and sprinkled sand over it. This is just beach sand, but you can use whatever sand you like. You can use base ready mixes. I would recommend just to go with something that fits your mat, fits your gaming mat or fits your gaming table or the bases of your miniatures. And now that it looks like a tasty schnitzel, it's almost ready to paint. I just tipped the excess off and then soaked the whole thing in thinned down PVA glue. This creates a nice bond so the sand doesn't fall off later on when dry brushing or painting. And then it's already time to glue your pieces on. I originally used hot glue, but that doesn't seem to hold, so I went back and used PVA glue, and this takes a long time to dry, but in the end it worked. And after throwing the first piece headfirst into the PVA glue, I put all the pieces where I intended them to go, and it was basically done. I gave all of them a good squeeze, so they sat all nice and tight. And later on I also went back with some super glue and just put little blobs of super glue in between the crates and where I stacked the crates so they all had a tight bond with each other. I also put some super glue around the edges on the sand, and this created a really strong bond because sand with PVA glue, sand with super glue bonds basically like concrete. And here you can see me showing off the first piece. I also stippled on a bit of texture paste. You can see on the crates these brown patches is like a very fine grained texture paint. This is just to have a base to work with rust effects later on, or just have some accumulated sand on them. I then also searched my bits box for a few interesting pieces that I could add to these crates, and I decided on a few Imperial Guard helmets and also some Imperial Guard weaponry and some Space Marine bolters, just to simulate some life in the terrain. Maybe these were abandoned crates, or maybe they are engaging in the battlefield and just stocking up on ammunition, and I just tried to tell a small story with these pieces, and I think these small bits help to bring life to the scene. And yeah, here you can see the finished results of the modeling and building stage, and the next step is going to be painting. So I decided to go with the classic red for the barrels and green for the crates, like we also see in the GW artwork. And I later on also decided to do some blue barrels just to have some more interesting colors in it. And for the colors just use whatever you want. Don't use too saturated colors because that will look funny, but if you like it to look cheesy and funny, use saturated colors. I mostly used military colors like drab green and like a really dark hull red. And I also tried to use colors that I won't usually use in miniature painting. And this isn't a creative choice, this is just to use up all my colors and don't waste colors I would usually use on miniature. Same with the ground. So here you can see I already did a coat of brown on the earth parts. And for that I used Green Stuff World's Earth, which is a pigment paint. I think it's just something like a already pre-mixed pigment paint. Well, all paints have pigments, but these are like something like dry pigments with a binder in them, so they dry more powdery and matte. And I didn't really notice an effect from these, so I would just say just use any thinned down brown paint. I used a thinned down dark brown paint here just to fill the crevices between the sand so you don't have the black shining through later on. I didn't want to be bothered with something like edge highlighting or really particular chipping effects on the barrels, so I just ripped a sponge. I just used something like foam, you get also in foam trays for your miniatures. I just ripped a piece of that foam in half and stippled on a lighter green on the crates, and a lighter red on the barrels and a lighter blue on the blues. So this not only does create a chipping effect, but it also creates something like an edge highlight in a way. It's like a dry brushing but stippled on, and that was creating really interesting effect. And I later on went in with another brown and did the same, and these brown parts I focused on the parts where I did a lot of the previous lighter color. So these are really big chips and thicker chips where the material underneath is going to start rusting and showing. And this created really interesting effects on the barrels, and it was really fast and really interesting to do. And the only brush painting I did was on the metallics. I just picked a good covering metallic. In this case, I think it was dark metal from scale 75. And painted a few of the Imperial Eagles on the crates and the metal parts on the weaponry, and that was basically it, and that was also basically the painting part nearly done. The one thing left to do was the ground, so the sand, and I just used a lighter brown, a yellowish brown, as you can see here, to do a first dry brushing step, and then I went back with an even lighter sand color and dry brushed further highlights on. And yeah, that's classic method, dry brushing sand to create a nice terrain effect. And with the painting done, it was onto my favorite part, which is Tufts. I really like to use a lot of tufts, and I think a big variety of tufts really gives your terrain pieces and your basing in general a really interesting look. In this case, I focused the tufts around the crates, so this wasn't a creative choice, this was just so I wouldn't have tufts where I would place my miniatures, so they won't get in the way and hide underneath the bases and get pushed flat or even push over the miniatures. And with having them around the crates, it really looks like the barrels and crates were sitting there for a while and maybe were abandoned ammunition stocks, and it could even add something to the narrative like this. And the last thing to do, also one of my favorite things, was using pigments. And I didn't film that because my battery was empty and I couldn't be bothered with charging it before finishing this terrain. And I put on the pigments in patches. I started with Dark Earth from Amomik and then put in a few different patches with Middle East Dust, also from Amomik. This creates a nice opportunity to create some variations in the sand colors and the dirt colors, and also gives you a nice opportunity to tie in all the tufts and all the terrain with the ground. I also used the pigments to further enhance the narrative that these crates were sitting there for a while. So I also put a lot of pigments on the terrain itself, on the barrels and on the crates, like they accumulated dirt and dust. And I think it looks really nice like that. I initially wanted to do an additional oil wash, but I thought that this was quite enough. Because the pigments collected in the recesses of the terrain, it wasn't really necessary to put in another oil wash or put in another recess shade or something like that. And I thought this was enough contrast and this was enough detail for a terrain piece like this, and I left it at that. Here you can see me showing off the final results. I hope you enjoyed this. I really enjoyed the building process. It was easy and fast, and I could use up some bits that I had laying around for a long time. Bits that I actually really liked, and now I have terrain that I actually really like. And I think these are pieces you could actually use in a game. So it's a win-win-win for me, and I hope it's at least one win for you in any sense. And yeah, if you got any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments and I will for sure get back to you. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you stick around for the next video. Thanks for watching.